vital role of Ethernet. Camille Mendler was a brand new hat as an Informa person, rather than somebody from her previous analyst company, which I'll mention. Camille Mendler. And can the rest of the panel come down as well, please, and join her?
Okay, I don't know if my mic is on. As the panel assembles, I thought it might be interesting to just quote to you a way that the telecoms industry is perceived from another completely different market. And I'm going to quote from a research study by a company that focuses on the real estate market, in other words, on property. The economy is headed for recovery, but not every industry is expected to perform well. Indeed, there are a number at the end of their life cycle and on the verge of extinction. In this list of industries, this includes record stores, DVD games, video stores, newspaper publishing, and fixed-line telecommunications operators. Are there a few in the room? I suspect there might be one or two. I think yes, there is a clicker somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I'll worry about that later. And it's stated here that for telecoms operators in the fixed line space to survive, they might want to consider disposing of their excess property assets as a way to survive. For giving the example of AT&T and T-Mobile, the merger, that would achieve about $3 billion in synergies, and many of those synergies being in property. Now, I'm not sure if I agree with that, but that's something we'll discuss. And one of the points of the speech, thanks for moving my slides, I didn't need to do that, but that's okay, is that Ethernet and cloud are viewed as one way that the telecoms industry is going to generate a great deal more money, correct? So I'm not sure if the people on the panel would agree that telecoms, and in particular fixed-line telecoms, is an industry fading and in decline. Let me just throw that out to the panel for the moment. Bill, I seem to remember Bill from Spirent, the CEO of Spirent. I think you were saying to me this was one of the most exciting... why are you moving through my slides? Yeah, please don't do that. I do have a clicker. I found it. Bill, you were saying?
Yeah, I was saying that...
You were saying about what this city?
We were talking earlier about the idea that this is one of the most exciting times in telecommunications and IT in a long time. If you think back, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was, too many service providers building networks without real applications. And today, the service providers are building networks to meet the demands of anytime, anywhere, internet access being driven by consumers and business customers around the world.
And it's being underscored, perhaps, by Ethernet. And that's what we're going to debate today. If Ethernet and cloud are really the saviors of the telecoms industry, and how are they interdependent with each other, correct?
Absolutely.
And now you've made a statement, that was Latin, wasn't it?
It was Latin.
Many of us who grew up in Europe had to learn Latin for a few years. Many of you in the audience will not have that pleasure. But that was an interesting argument that you made there. Now, Bernie, I'd like to introduce Bernie Trudell, who is from Cisco. Some of you may have met him. What are your views? You're here in Asia, you've been here for a number of years. Would you say the telecoms industry is fading in decline when you consider Ethernet and cloud?
No, I think the opportunity in front of the telecoms industry is fantastic. And cloud does bring that, and Ethernet is a fundamental layer that's going to enable cloud services to be delivered to various consumers of cloud services.
Okay, so these guys are quite positive. And Amit, who you met before, well...
Thanks for that, Camille. If we actually look at Ethernet and cloud, it's all about access, right? And Ethernet started off, being more of a platform being used inside enterprises, right? And essentially the reason why it's been growing, the reason why you have mass adoption is because of low cost, simplicity, and high speeds. Right? Now, some of the earlier challenges that were there in the first few versions in terms of poor scalability, very slow.
Well, we'll address that. We'll address that. You think that some of the problems have been solved.
Yes.
But if we look at the telecoms industry today, there are still some issues to deal with. And I think this is the issue. It's the balancing act between the fact that most service providers have got to keep a tight control on costs, correct? And also try to innovate, grow that top line. And the question we're trying to address is the combination of Ethernet and cloud, a way to achieve that. That's one of the issues. There's conflict in the market. Another is, well, actually fear. There's a great deal of fear. How many of you actually own a tablet yet? A fair few. And how many of you have that tablet paid for by your employer? Not a single one. Okay. Okay. And yet, the truth is, we're all going to have one. We're going to have one very, very soon. And whether you are in Taipei, whether you're in Beijing, wherever you are, someone is going to be using a tablet in a number of different ways. Their adoption is unstoppable. And there's a consequence to that. This is not an Asian country. This is a piece of work that we did recently on what the growth of mobile broadband traffic would be with the expected distribution of devices, smartphones, non-smartphones, and portable devices like tablets. You need to be prepared to grow, to be able to deal with that growth. These are the issues that cause some panic in the market. So what do we need to be successful and to survive in this market going forwards? Right, let's try one thing. We need just-in-time processes. All right? I think we can thank Toyota for that concept, correct? Just-in-time manufacturing, but now applied in a different way. So let me ask the panel, do you think that we have, in the telecoms industry, a just-in-time process? Do we have the infrastructure to deliver just-in-time demand, satisfaction and consumption? Bernie, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, I think the tools are there. I think a lot of operators are evolving towards that. And certainly when we speak to telecoms operators about building cloud services, we really look across the board at organizations, organizational structures, operational processes in order to ensure that when they are launching cloud, and often they're launching cloud in pilots, that they're actually learning about the types of operational processes that they need to have in place in order to fulfill the characteristics of a cloud service.
But as 100,000 or 200,000 or 1 million or 50 million people get onto tablets, do you think we have the processes to support the growth in demand in bandwidth and other resources? Do you have any thoughts on that now?
Yeah, I think, I think as a service provider, I obviously have the ultimate respect for it. Now I'm really being one of them. It's really hard. In fact, I think the process is one of the hardest things, in the growth of telecommunications. And it's because that there is million net years built on the existing processes, and any changes to those processes take just very long and very costly. Unless you have to justify, figure out a way to justify that, it's really hard. I think there is a revolution to be made here, really trying to help. I just using an example of you comparing the overall growth of a data network in terms of processes interconnected different networks versus today's telephony networks, which I make some examples of. You can see the difference, and when you're making a telephony calls, it's very mature. You can reach anywhere in the world between any given endpoint in seconds, with multiple carriers in between. And today's data network, if you do the same thing, use the same analogy, from the time you dial a number to the time the phone starts ringing.
But that's just telephony.
Well,
how long does it take to provision an Ethernet circuit? How many business days does it take?
I'm just going to say that, you use that analogy, the phone won't ring in 9 months from your dial number. So you just talk about the processes.
So we've got to have just-in-time business process. And if you think about all of these different moving parts, these industrial components you need to deliver clouds, that's kind of one that we need to deal with. Now, Spirits, I know, has been dealing at every layer, if you will, from a device layer, a software layer, to all of the different aspects of the delivery, the industrial delivery of the cloud. What do you think of how far are we from like a just-in-time process in terms of delivering cloud services? What are the big issues?
Yeah, I think that, as been said already, I think the tools and technologies are there, whether it's, the access piece of the network, whether it's the rollout of LTE, whether it's higher speed Ethernet with 40 and 100 gigabit, whether it's cloud computing services or virtualization. What has been said over the last couple of days, it's just in its infancy. And it's ultimately going to come down to, performance, availability, and scalability, and security, and the rollout of those technologies, and whether they're robust enough and we can get to a point where they're mature, and the process around them mature enough to be just in time. And I think they're just in their infancy. That's the great news, is that we're just beginning this journey, and we have the technology or tools, as Bernie said, to roll that out. Now they've got to mature.
Now, you deal with the device makers, the equipment manufacturers, you work with service providers. Tell us, because it's just us girls in the audience here, what is most in its infancy? What is the issue that needs to be addressed? Number one on the list to make this a just-in-time environment.
I think it goes back to, it's probably performance first, because if it doesn't work, if it doesn't perform to the quality of experience expectation of the end user, then that's the place you fundamentally have to start. And then the questions become tougher. If it performs, does it scale?
Right.
Is it always available? Is it secure? They follow. But first and foremost, on any technology rollout, it's got to perform to the expectations of the quality experience of the end user, which has never been higher.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we talked a lot about capacity, the huge need for capacity. But is it actually the issue of congestion and the demand for bandwidth, or is it actually that quality experience which is related to latency?
I think that the user expects the same quality of experience, whether it's at work or at home or on a mobile device, no matter where they are in the world. That's the expectation today. It's truly never been higher. And the example you gave to the audience is, have we all bought personal tablets and used a laptop or a mobile device for work? Absolutely. And I think what that says is people expect from a consumer social networking application the same quality of experience that they do on their work applications, but they're using different devices to get to it.
So I'm going to ask you this question, because many of your peers are in the audience. Do you think that the service provider that can solve the problem of applications performance, service persistence across the tablet, the feature phone, the notebook, is the one that will actually dominate the market? Is that the one thing that one needs to achieve to be successful?
I would say that service providers certainly play a key role, but it is not only the service provider, right? Because once you talk about the end-to-end application experience, right, it's starting from serving the application out through the access, where the service provider does certainly play a key role in terms of the latency and so on and so forth. But it's also the user experience on the device, right? And that is a place where I would say the service provider really doesn't have to play. That is
that true? I guess my question is Ethernet and cloud computing two of the key methodologies, technologies that are going to enable that service persistence and that reduce that latency problem to that application that might be consumed from that tablet?
Absolutely, and it will do that at a very competitive cost, simply because of Ethernet being one of the lower cost, high performance platforms.
So I was in Kuala Lumpur a few days ago and bombarded with advertising. From, yes, YTL, the conglomerate, that is now talking about its 4G cloud phone, SIM-less cloud phone. And I noticed there's a gentleman from Maxis here. It's a WiMAX-based phone from your competitor. I was quite surprised to see that they were talking about cloud to a consumer market. If I may, can I ask you to comment in general about, people understand that cloud environment and the fact that it could offer, a better experience? It was a very surprising piece of advertising, I felt. If you could bring in a mic, that would be great.
First of all, I must say that I'm a big advocate for Ethernet, Metro E, as well as EIPL, city to city, country to country. A lot of issues we face today in terms of managing customer experience, latency, jitter, and packet loss, whether it's voice or data or any applications on the cloud. The landscape varies from country to country. We have in Singapore recently they spent $1 billion putting out a fiber to Informa and NBN. Australia they go ahead and spend about 8 to 9 billion on NBN. And likewise in Malaysia as well, putting the TMF, HSTV, where part of government sponsor about 2 billion to go out fiber to every homes and every buildings. We believe that there are areas, pockets of areas where fiber and Ethernet will be the ideal solution. But in a large country like Malaysia, and if you go over to the East Malaysia, you realize that it is simply not cost effective to have fiber everywhere and Ethernet everywhere. And so now wireless become another viable model. And our main players in Malaysia, such as P1, is now taking the opportunity to have a high, sort of bandwidth which they believe they can deliver a decent user experience. And one of the questions I asked earlier was the service provider, how they see cloud internally. And you can see that now mobile as a service now positions as a cloud application. It's not just your payroll and HRM and your Salesforce. If you look at it, today when we go to an app store, what we're doing is pulling lots of applications down to our phone and running off our smartphone and off the local phones. If the thinking is, why do you need to pull the application down? Why can't you simply run the application off the cloud, whether it's the Angry Bird or any other application you have, and simply have the display transmitted to your phone instead of the need to download full apps. I think that's where some of the players are positioning themselves in that manner.
Now, you've mentioned, of course, that Malaysia is a sizable country, fibre cannot go everywhere. But one thing that I do note is the fibre is going to the base station. And what's powering that? A lot of that is Ethernet. And Ethernet seems to be adapting to a number of different conditions, correct? I mean, that's, I don't know how long you've been in the business. I've been in the business a few years, but it seems to me that every time there's a problem, Ethernet turns up to try to solve the solution. How well it does it is perhaps what we can debate. Bernie, what do you think? I mean, is Ethernet a clever technology, or is it just endlessly adaptable? I mean, how would you characterize it? Nan, I'm not asking that question first, because I know you already got thoughts. So just hear someone else.
Well, in my opinion, yes.
So, yeah, Ethernet is definitely adaptable now. Ethernet has evolved quite a bit over the years, especially over the last 5 years, as we've been adding the functionality that we need, whether it's running Ethernet in the core of a service provider network or running Ethernet in the data center.
Yeah. We look at this. It seems to be everywhere, doesn't it?
It is.
It's in the backhaul, that fibre backhaul, right?
But and Ethernet though is not the only solution. Ethernet is the foundation, and of course, as the gentleman from Maxis pointed out, you're going to need other technologies to reach end user devices. Your tablets don't connect by Ethernet to the cloud, and you're likewise in the data center. You're going to need technologies that are able to connect, for example, to the virtual machine. Ethernet doesn't connect directly to the virtual machine. You need the ability to get there.
I mean, there are many beautiful technologies that have been engineered over the decades, and one of them that I recall fairly well, and some of you in the audience will remember as well, is one called ATM. And ATM was supposed to solve everybody's problem, correct? But that one doesn't seem to be around very much anymore. Now, I mean, Ethernet, how will you describe Ethernet?
Yeah, I know I certainly feel that the Ethernet had that ability. I think the going through from enterprise, where I remember seeing the token ring, I remember seeing a lot of things.
Which were a lot more sophisticated technologies than Ethernet. So Ethernet is like a mediocre technology?
Yeah, well, the way I always define it, a lot of people ask me about this, right? I always say Ethernet is, the way Ethernet always winning, both enterprise space and now, is the cheapest good enough technology. Good enough probably means that quality service, probably means speed, probably means, a lot of things, just good enough for that application. It's not necessarily always been the best technology, but that's what
so in other words, as Ethernet grows globally, our networks, our businesses, all of the consumer networks are going to be run on good enough technology. Are we happy with that? Does anyone want to make a comment? Good enough technology is good enough.
Well, and if it isn't good enough, we'll make it better.
Okay, does anyone want to answer that big question? That's a good question. Bill, do you have any thoughts?
Sorry, say more.
You good enough is good enough.
I think that again, if it's not good enough, we'll make it better. I think that's the cost piece of this. Because Ethernet is a technology, no one's come up with a solution that's lower cost. Starting in the LAN, in the consumer environment, moving into the access, into the core of the network. I think it's allowed to evolve as a technology because of the cost. There's been nothing, no new technology has been able to unseat Ethernet. It's been allowed to evolve, and the standards have changed over time to add synchronization for mobile backhaul, to add robustness for fiber channel over Ethernet, all driven by the lowest cost solution. And I think that it's good enough, but it's evolved into a much different Ethernet than we started with.
Okay, that may be the case. Now, the gentleman from China Mobile is talking about there are no dumb pipes out there, but it strikes me that you just said, all of you have just said that Ethernet is good enough and it's kind of dumb, right? But it is ubiquitous, correct?
We never said it was done.
You didn't say it was dumb.
No, we said it was good enough.
Okay.
We said good enough, good enough. Don't think of good enough as a bad word, right? I mean, good enough, that means that, if you have 5 girls here, you're going to pick the prettiest one. Good enough, it means the prettiest one, Sorry, I'm not digressing here.
I'd like to make another point here, and that is, it's also the standards, right? And Ethernet has been driving standards, the 802.1 standards, and it's been evolving. So it's not just that it's being haphazard and it's just been put together and cobbled together. It's been following a very, I would say, extensive roadmap in terms of development, in terms of adding new features, functionality, and extending the original Ethernet specifications.
Maybe I might agree with you, but with my devil's advocate role, I would say, well, coupling Ethernet with cloud is perhaps not such a good thing on that perspective, because I cannot say that cloud computing is totally standardized. How many different cloud computing standards groups are there? Cloud Security Alliance, there's an alphabet soup of standards bodies. I think the latest one to weigh their opinion was the IEEE with their aspects. So this seems like a bit of a disconnect, and you're expecting enterprises to combine Ethernet, which is standardized, with cloud computing, which is not standardized.
Well, I think we also have to put Ethernet in its place in the whole stack. Ethernet is a layer 1, layer 2 technology. It's not a layer 7 and 8 technology, which cloud services are.
Right.
And so, while Ethernet forms the foundation for cloud services, we still need to add functionality, as I mentioned, within the data center, between data centers. All of those technologies are required in order to offer the service level objectives associated with various cloud services. And one of the reasons we don't have standardized cloud services is because we really are delivering different types of services.
Are we really delivering different types of cloud services? I might disagree with that. I think there's one thing that's very similar between Ethernet and cloud, is that there are strong forces trying to commoditize them. What is a commodity? It is a product that has one single definition that is interchangeable from one provider to another. And if you consider Ethernet exchanges, surely that commoditizes Ethernet. And what about the fact that people like Amazon Web Services services and Spot Cloud are selling virtual machine instances on an open spot market. Is there a difference? It seems to me that there are forces to commoditize the cloud. True?
So again, to commoditize the fundamentals of cloud. So you need some fundamentals. So Ethernet is one of those fundamentals, and we're slowly approaching or evolving towards a fundamental, if you want, cloud machine or cloud server, which you're alluding to with regard to Amazon Web Services and the spot pricing. There are a lot of added value cloud services that sit on top of that and that make use of that. And that's where really cloud is, and that's where the power of cloud is.
And on the point of relationship between Ethernet and cloud, if cloud components are being sold on a commodity spot market and Ethernet is being sold on a commodity exchange basis, why can't these two things merge? Why can't we have exchanges to get the basic components of cloud and Ethernet sold as a package together? Is that something you've thought about now? With your other hat on of the CNIX, which is the Carrier Ethernet exchange.
Yeah, we certainly see the emergence, not necessarily in the sense of you should talk about, but we do see the people who has been what I call the content providers or cloud providers. Those are the ones that use through their Ethernet exchanges be able to provide access to eyeballs of millions who as a service provider connecting at the exchanges. In our case, just quickly, that with all the aggregate number of service points, we have exceeded like 15 million, locations which are accessible through exchanges. That provides tremendous value to the cloud providers where they want to be able to access those potentially private cloud eyeballs. So we've seen that as a trend.
And the differentiation would be on the service performance, right? Because we don't the combinations. And Bill, you're doing a lot of work on trying to help people with quality of customer experience, quality of experience, correct?
Right. I mean, I wouldn't say commoditize as much as competitive, maybe hyper-competitive. So everybody's always going to have competition. And I think what was said earlier is how do you hold on to your customers? Well, it's about getting it right the first time when they come to you to develop or deliver a service to them. And it's about keep getting it right. Because the stakes are really, really high today. With social media and making a mistake, with rolling out a service or meeting customer expectations, they've never been higher. And you have strong competition, hyper-competitive maybe, commodity, I don't think so. But I think ultimately it's about getting it right the first time, keep getting it right. That's the only way you keep customers. That's what really matters.
So what you sell is actually a commodity that might be interchangeable from service provider to service provider, but it's the service experience. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Amit, do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that.
So that's the advice you give everyone. Don't worry about the technology, just worry about the service, the quality of experience.
The technology is related to the quality of experience, so I would say don't worry about the technology. From our side, we need to worry about the technology to make sure that we deliver the quality of service. But that is the experience, that is the engagement that will keep our customers.
Okay. Because to me, it sounds a bit familiar. It reminds me of like a decade ago when we were in the Enron era and people were talking about trading bandwidth like orange juice. No, they were. That's what we were talking about.
But they didn't have any customers then. So
No, we didn't have customers. But if you start commoditizing certain aspects of network delivery, what happens if you have a commodity? Then the difference is, there's maybe the cost of production and a few percentage points above. So it seems to me that profit margins might not get any bigger, so we're really going to grow the top line.
It's about, so there are two different discussions here. One is about retaining customers, right? And that's about having the quality of experience, and that goes across any.
And Ethernet will help with that quality of experience.
Absolutely. At a cost which is lower than having the other technologies. The other aspect is to always have functionality, features that we build onto the services that we have, right? And that's why you see, telecom providing cloud services and so on and so forth, right? So it's actually both. It's not just having, vanilla services. It's about continuously innovate.
Now you did a great job earlier on today talking about your cloud services, your infrastructure as a service, but as I recall, the service level agreement that you offer is purely about infrastructure as a service and not about the connectivity. Why aren't you bundling a service level agreement that's an end-to-end agreement integrating Ethernet connectivity, for example, and the provision of that cloud service.
We
Isn't that a natural combination?
We absolutely have that for our larger customers, where we talk about an end-to-end service level agreement, where we provide the connectivity right up to the customer premise using our network. Absolutely, yes. But that is not something that is a must-have for all our customers. So it is a choice that we give our customers.
But it's a dangerous choice, is it not? Since they can just swap out the bandwidth as they will. And it also means that the cloud service that you're offering is just like an Amazon cloud service, potentially.
Potentially it is, in the sense that, well, not from the feature functionality itself, so there's a whole aspect of that which I have to talk about in listing. But in terms of access, the ability to access, yes, it is very similar. If somebody has an access to the internet, they can access and use right now for this room, we can use this.
I would submit to you that unless you provide an end-to-end service to everyone, including the connectivity, you won't make any profit margin out of cloud computing. Bernie, would you like to comment on that? Either disagree or agree with that?
Actually, I agree with the premise. Compute as a service, as we were talking just a little earlier, is heading towards commoditization.
That's a cost-plus environment.
Right, but the opportunity for service providers is because they have the network in place and they have the ability to measure, they have the visibility on the network and the ability to control the quality of the experience to the end user, then that's how they can differentiate themselves and add value and therefore charge more.
But in practice, that's not happening, is it now?
I think it's actually happening today, right? I mean, if you think about it, there's two set of people who actually provide the infrastructure, actually play really well in this particular environment, offer kind of end-to-end service to the enterprise from a cloud computing perspective. One is the data center providers who have the capabilities of doing so, although they lack what Bernie was talking about, the delivery mechanism to the end users. And service provider today, and they're looking at the data centers and as a part of, I think John talked about yesterday, that about instead of being a transit in traffic, they're becoming a destination for telecommunication service providers, right? So most recent example is the Verizon buying Terramart, which is really the hosting center, the interconnect centers, which allow Verizon to provide that cloud services across geographic diverse areas and provide that services to everybody. So I mean, certainly, I think that's where it's going to differentiate because of network impact. That's even harder to build. There really is a differentiation.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Or would anyone like to disagree about the fact you need to have an end-to-end service experience? Yes, sir. We'll just bring you a mic.
I just want to comment.
Can you tell us who you are?
I am Tony Chan from Comstate. One of the things I noticed that you talked about, one of the characteristics of cloud is that it's on demand and you can subscribe to resources as you need them, right? But the telco model of providing connectivity is completely different, right? I mean, you can get an Ethernet port, you can burst the traffic, but you probably have to sign a 1-year contract. If not, then you still need to subscribe to the port, right? So it's like, you can't just say I want a gig path for 2 minutes, on every Thursday afternoon. So, is that something that service providers perhaps need to kind of refigure their business model?
Some of them are, but some of it's a billing issue, right? Does anyone want to comment on that?
Well, I was just going to say that's true. I mean, I see the carriers. What we're really talking about the end users and enterprises, right? So carriers are basically somewhat, when they provide internet services, they have that opportunity. I mean, they have the platform to be able to deliver that on-demand services, and some of them are actually working on that. And I see there's maybe a handful of them start to actually deliver that services, but it has not really been combined with the cloud services, so to speak.
I think one thing I would probably argue is that you need to have that end-to-end experience. You need to sell Ethernet plus cloud. And if these things are starting to commoditize, then there's going to be more price competition.
Yeah,
My great fear for all all of the service providers is they're going to replace one problem with another. They're worried about being dumb pipes, they might be dumb clouds instead. Anyone want to comment on that?
Well,
And if they're selling generic solutions to broad-based, completely vanilla solutions on cloud, they're not going to solve that problem, are they?
well, I think it's the most important thing to think about it. They actually have a pretty good stranglehold on the end user customers, frankly. And once you once you deliver that Ethernet, it's kind of hard to change. When you have an entry level going into their networks and you're the primary service providers, it's really hard for a second guy to come in to replace it because there's so many telecommunication services you already tied up. That's where the Ethernet beauty of Ethernet is. Once you have that coming to the door, you deliver a lot of different services to them. It's fairly challenging for them.
If they sell to the same person, but on the cloud side, if they sell a vanilla, a plain cloud service, very easy to churn, as you all yourself explained.
Absolutely. And so if you look at the cloud services, we didn't talk about all the aspects of cloud. We talked about IaaS, then there's the software as a service. That's when you start having a little bit more stickiness, because they usually have
More stickiness, but you also have to share the revenue with the Salesforce.com or the Google.
Then there's platform as a service, and the final play is business process as a service. And that is where the company is actually outsourcing its internal business processes onto the cloud.
And those business processes are going to be different by industry. And I think that's probably the next thing I would say is be careful about that dumb cloud. Maybe the key issue is to look at what specific customer needs are in particular industries. And that's really where we ought to drive the market, not just the Ethernet market, but the cloud market. So what work's being done on that? Can you talk about what Cisco's been doing on that?
Actually, if I can
Oh, sure.
just another point that you referred to the dumb cloud a couple of times, and maybe we'll...
Well, I'm afraid, having looked at many service providers' cloud offers, having audited quite a few, about 40 odd, I don't see much differentiation except price, and that's a concern to me.
Right, and we are early in the industry. But I think we're...
Youth doesn't mean, it's not necessarily an excuse, is it?
No, it isn't. But I think what we're heading to is, and I'll put this up, just good enough cloud. And what I mean by that...
Right, I'm a multi-billion-dollar bank and I want to spend money on a good enough cloud.
Yes, right, just good enough for my business, right? Because I want to pay for a service and I want the price to be equivalent to the service that I'm getting. Right? That's just good enough to meet the requirements of my business users.
I don't think
Of course, I have different sets of business users and therefore I have different levels of just good enough. But those will meet the requirements. And that's really the promise of cloud computing.
Just good enough cloud. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I don't know why you guys really demonize just good enough. I mean, it's good enough. Okay, that's good. I mean, I guess.
Because if that just good enough cloud service or Ethernet service is running my electricity, helping to run my electricity supply, that concerns me somewhat for my entire country.
Well, I think it's just good enough. Just good enough, it really means that the service, like Bernie said, right? The service you want to look at, you want to deliver is good enough, then it's good enough. It's not necessarily saying, okay, it has to be, again, if that particular application we're delivering, we want, the 1 millisecond latency. I don't want to pay, the price for the 1 microsecond latency.
Well,
right?
rest assured, I can't think of any service providers offering 5 nines for cloud services. So that isn't happening at the moment. Bill?
No, I think it's all about meeting your expectations. I think that's where Bernie's going. I think that the reverse side of it is good enough, but I think that the positive side of it is if I needed a certain level of quality of experience, a certain level of performance, or a certain level of scalability, that's all I really want to pay for ultimately. And I think that's more the important point. And I think they've got to be, cloud services have got to get to a point where they're differentiated. You've got to be able to differentiate your offering. Maybe you own the access, which gives you an advantage, clearly, as a service provider. But ultimately, your offering has to be differentiated from somebody else.
You just remind me of something. You said meeting expectations. Just a quick aside, the happiest people in the world who win, surveys about being the happiest people in the world are actually the Danish. Small country, Northern Europe. And I remember speaking to a Danish client of mine. I said, I hear you're the happiest people in the world. Fantastic. He said, yes, Camille, but that's because our expectations are so low. Is this the market we want to operate in? I don't know.
From the service level, if you go back to service levels, right, we often talk about bronze, silver, and gold.
Yeah.
Right? So if you need a silver service, but the service provider is only offering you a gold service, then you have to pay gold for it. Right? You're not meeting your expectation, but you want a silver service and a silver service.
Well, we'll discuss more of this during next event, but I thank the panel for the debate, and we'll move on to the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.